Flight 241, request heading 090 for 75 miles, and on course to avoid weather.
Avoid weather surprises with multi-scan Threattrack. It's the first fully certified airborne weather radar with unprecedented capabilities on board Boeing's next-generation 737 and 777 aircraft. Multi-scan Threattrack can detect, assess, and predict as many as 46 developing threats in your flight path. The system's sophisticated data gathering and analysis give you the most accurate view of the threat. It also warns you about potential hail and lightning. Multi-scan Threattrack is your key to avoiding costly damage to your aircraft, your passenger experience, your fuel costs, your on-time record, and your reputation. Enhanced turbulence detection alerts you to severe and ride-quality turbulence. Commercial aircraft will experience an average of 750 turbulence-related passenger injuries per year. Turbulence damage annually costs airlines more than $100 million. Satellite-based geographic and seasonal weather data make multi-scan Threattrack ready for any flight, anywhere in the world. Multi-scan Threattrack weather radar, because even once, through a harrowing, damaging weather threat is too much.
Right. We've got 45 minutes in which to examine ensuring safety in the skies, or should we say also ensuring safety on the ground as well, because there are often a lot of incidents. The British Airways 747, which inadvertently took the wrong taxiway at Johannesburg and ended up with half its wing up against a building. Just to underscore to you, for those of you who got iPads or tablets and smartphones, you may want to just be looking at the release of the IATA figures on safety performance, encouraging signs for African safety. But they do have a lot of data in there about the number of hull losses there have been, mainly Western-built hulls, but also the data that's come out in the last year, which is by and large extraordinarily optimistic, given the volume of flights, particularly, and this is the one important fact just to bear in mind for this discussion, that global Western-built jet accident rate measured in hull losses per million flights of Western-built jets was 0.41. That's the equivalent of one accident for every 2.4 million flights. And this was a step back from 2012, when the accident rate was slightly better at 0.21, the lowest in aviation history. But 2013 does show a 14.6% improvement on the 5-year average of 0.48. Now, there's a lot of data in there, but that comes from what you can get from the IATA PDF, which is obviously a very detailed document, but it shows that things are moving in the right direction, and certainly it pays tribute to Africa as well, where things have improved quite considerably, particularly because of IOSA. Let me introduce our panel. Zhou Kaishuan, who has been, he's now retired, Deputy Director of the Civil Aviation Administration of China, and you are an engineer. And on that side of the issues relating to flight safety, Ismaeil Mohammed Blooshi, who is Assistant Director General for Safety Affairs, and Nicholas Dahlstrom, who's Human Factors Manager for Emirates Airline. Now, obviously, underpinning all of this is what happened to the Malaysian airliner as well, which we don't know, and the Australians at this moment are saying they can't yet put down a submersible because they're not sure that what they've discovered at 14,800 feet depth is yet the black box. But it raises, without any kind of suggestion of incrimination or allegation, it still has raised a number of questions about behavior, human behavior in ensuring flight safety. And I'd like to first of all go to Nicholas just to underscore for us the size now of your airline And therefore, for you, in your position as Human Factors Manager, which is an interesting title, how many people you are having to deal with now in an enormous airline growing so fast with so many A380s?
Thank you very much, Nick. We are 50,000 plus, closer. We are 50,000 plus employees. Out of those, we have 3,700 pilots and 17,000 cabin crew, which I directly or indirectly train. We also have human factors on the engineering side. So human behavior has not only become something you want to do, it's mandatory, and it provides obvious benefits both for safety and efficiency.
And what kind of turnover of staff do you have each year, roughly?
It's actually very low. I don't know the numbers for all categories, but for pilots, it's less than 3%.
And let me just go through, Mr. Zhou, how fast is the responsibility of the CAAC expanding when it comes to responsibility, the speed of growth of Chinese airlines in numbers of planes and numbers of pilots and personnel?
By the way, let me say, 20 years ago, when I was the director of aircraft supervision division in the CAAC, we have only about 500 transport category aircraft registered in China. Now, by the end of last year, we have a totally 2,400 plus transport category registered in China. So the speed we developed is very, very, very fast. So it's not the first time for us to face this kind of a pressure on our shoulder. So we have to control that. We have to find a method to overcome them.
And Mr. Blooshi, what's the speed of growth? We were hearing a lot about it yesterday, but what you are now facing when it comes to the responsibility you have for safety affairs in the GCAA?
It's interesting to hear my colleague in China talking about the size of the aviation today in China. If you look at the map, there's no way you can compare UAE to China. But when it comes to aviation, I would say that aviation have definitely outgrown the size of the country. And we have 400 plus, it will be safe to say 500 transport category airplane. So we are 1/4 of what China has. And this move didn't happen in a span of 20 years. I would say we have a solid 10% growth in the aviation sector by terms of registered airplanes. So the growth is phenomenal. The growth is not only at the vertical level by terms of numbers, but it's also in the horizontal level. UAE today is in the production line. We do produce aircraft parts at Strata and Al Ain. We are also very active in the training side. I think there is a large percentage of aircraft simulators which are in the
I'm just
UAE.
trying to get to the scale of challenge for safety in the skies.
That's
And I'm trying to get an idea of the scale of development and expansion there is from all three of you at the moment. Let me move on, because one of the things that has come through, being confirmed again by IATA this week, is human behavior in all of this. Actually, it's not the technical issues, it's human behavior. Nicholas, what is your assessment of the challenges of human behavior? Because we're all human beings, drivers make mistakes, train drivers make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes, they lose concentration, or they have other personal problems. What is your assessment of human behavior in ensuring safety in the skies? How much of a challenge it is, or is not?
It is a big challenge. We made enormous strides, enormous successes with safety. I think the IATA report says 210 fatalities last year. That is an enormous success. Actually, unintentional deaths in the home in the US is 20,000, a factor 100 bigger. So people should stay less at home and go flying more. But the actual point here is that we've made great strides. I think the big challenge right now is measuring. Most managers and CEOs come from an engineering or financial background. They think they can measure humans like they can measure technology. That is not possible. And I'm going to give you one example. There was a company who measured everything. They measured injury rates, they measured process safety, they measured the transport safety. And everything was showing green. They were doing great. And then Deepwater Horizon, Mokondo blew up. But all their safety performance indicators showed green, which proved to them that the safety performance indicators had zero predictive value. So when we try to measure human behavior, we must understand it first, and there is currently a lack of that depth of understanding in the industry.
What's your reflection on the relationship, particularly between co-pilots and pilots, particularly the experienced pilot and the less than experienced co-pilots, or with far fewer hours? Now, again, not prejudging the Malaysia incident, but the Mangalore crash, Air France incident, there is a question about the relationship, and the Asiana San Francisco crash, and the deferential relationship between a co-pilot and a pilot.
This is an issue that we worked with in aviation since the 70s, the traditional picture of the authoritarian captain and the first officer who doesn't speak up. We've worked very hard at it, we've made great success, but it's still there. It's bound down to cultural norms and traditions, which takes time to affect. But on that note, there's actually a reversal of that issue as well. What I've been seeing in the last few years is trust as a problem. We've had crews, both in Emirates and other airlines, where they get into trouble because they trust the other one. We've built that by training them to trust each other. Now we see a problem with it. Say, why didn't you intervene before? Well, I trusted him. He's very experienced. He's well trained. Well, you have to. We have to check each other because human error happens, not because there's a lack of trust. So there's actually two sides to that issue. There's the traditional one of authority, but it's also a new one of people trusting each other too much.
You've made a point of saying that procedures are now failing the pilots, and there's not enough thinking anymore. How much is that an issue?
Again, we've been incredibly successful with increasing safety by implementing standard safety procedures. However, if you proceduralize too much, people stop thinking. And that's what we've been seeing. We've spent decades training decision-making out of pilots. Don't think, just follow the procedure. And now we've seen in the last decade, we must train it back into them. And that's where the resilience engineering movement. This is something we work with very hard in Emirates. And if I may add to your point there, there's a specific point about procedures and pilots there. This industry has for maybe a year or a bit more been talking about monitoring. You've read about it in international magazines, there's been conferences monitoring. As a human factors expert, I'm a little bit clueless. I don't understand what's going on. We're basically only telling the pilot to look harder. That's not going to help them. That's not a change of design. That's not a change of the situation. In fact, if we look at Air France, if we look at the UPS in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama last year, if we look at Asiana, we can talk about monitoring.
Are developing at the speed which certainly large Western airlines are realizing they have to change their attitude, as we've just heard from Nicholas, on human behavior.
From my point of view, I always complain to my boss, say, we may not develop it so fast, but in China, you cannot stop airlines, so you cannot invest money. You cannot develop yourself. So the only thing we can do is persuade them, so maybe slowly. On the other hand, if you have some problem, we will stop the privilege for airlines. You cannot say purchase more aircraft, but within the apparel.
But you are now under pressure from the LCCs, the low-cost carriers.
We are going to have, nowadays more and more the companies they would like to get into this market. In China, till now, we have about 50 commercial airlines right now. So only among them, there were only one airlines, they declared themselves as LCC low-cost carrier. As Chunqiu Airlines, they 5 years they start from A320. Now they have almost 40 it's a big airlines even. So
All right, well, I'm now bringing it back to the point we started on 20 minutes ago, which is about human behavior and experience, and particularly with the air traffic management challenges, because China faces a big shortage of pilots at the moment, and therefore you've got an age and experience issue. So what are you going to do about, how do you make sure that the officer sitting in the left-hand seat has the adequate experience to handle all these enormous pressures these days, and having that experience?
It's very, very difficult to deal with this kind of, overcome this kind of difficult. You know, even we issue a more than 23,000 pilots license to them, but I don't think.
Over what period? How many?
Totally 23,000.
1 year?
No, the whole.
Okay.
Yeah, the pilot's certificate license, but say among them we still feel there are some problems. In fact, it's I guess I was taught it's unique. Also, I'm not the pilot's background. I was taught the only China government say we asked the airlines to record, download every day for each flight's use QAR to check the Chinese. We delegate some inspectors, the airlines, 100% to check the content of QAR.
What's your view on the technical quality of the aircraft in China at the moment? You've got Airbus being built in Tianjin, you've got other aircraft being built, but does that mean that there's a built-in Chinese quality on engineering or not yet?
It's not easy. So that was one of my targets to push the.
Did that stress you when you were Director General, Deputy Director?
It's
one of your stress points. You were worried about that, were you?
Yeah. So if I would like to say in China, the challenge for us is we have so many aircraft here. Each year we need so large, huge amount of say maintenance work. But among our Chinese MRO, we have a totally a little bit more than 750 in the process. We issued the 145 throughout the world, about 400 in domestic of China, more than 350 outside of China, most of them in the United States.
All right.
But this 350 MROs outside of China, they occupied the more, let me say, more than 90% of the technical high-tech work. So 400 Chinese MROs only can do a very simple, that kind of work.
Okay. Well, what I think we've done is got to the root of the scale of the challenge, particularly on human behavior. Would anyone like to come in? We've got 20 minutes to run. Anyone sitting on your hands, you'd like to input, particularly with your own experience, and tell us who you are, please. Why don't you use, there's a microphone and coming here as well.
Hi, Todd Sienna, I'm the managing partner of Aviatech. We're a Shanghai-based aviation advisory firm. My question is for, I guess, either Dr. Dahlstrom or
Nicholas
Mr.
is fine.
Oh, okay, Nicholas. Yeah. How far away do you think we are in the future from having artificial intelligence piloted aircraft? And you know, is that something that's 50 years away, 10 years away, or what's your perspective?
Just before he answers, do you recognize what we've just heard from Mr. Zhou about you're in Shanghai, about what is happening in China? Is that your analysis as well?
Your question, which one?
Well, about just the challenges now for the Chinese aviation market, given that you're in Shanghai.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the the FAA has a very sophisticated system of delegating a lot of authority to like DER engineers and other civilians who are not exactly within the FAA organization, whereas the CAAC does not have such an expansive system, airworthiness system. So the amount of work that they can do, I mean, their resources are very limited. So that's why when you'll hear a lot of MROs or aircraft manufacturers potentially complaining about it might take a little longer to do things in China. I mean, they only have so many people.
But quickly, even if they don't have the resources, do you sense a commitment to move in that direction as speedily as possible?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're investing millions and millions of dollars every year to cooperate with the FAA and with the EASA, and there's very extensive cooperation partnerships between those organizations.
Would you like artificial intelligence running your aircraft, which means that there'll be no human factors and you won't have a job?
Oh, there are still human factors. It's just the designers' human factors instead of the pilots. There will always be human factors. We have this illusion that human error is only about pilots, but it could very well be at the designer stage. So that will always be there. But this is a question that often comes up when we will have fully automated flights. And I think we all can agree on that technology is not the obstacle. We could have it from tomorrow if we want to. The question is, do you get anyone to pay for the tickets? So it's about passenger psychology more than technology. Now, my children who go on the metro in Dubai or in other European cities, where I used to say that as long as there's train drivers, there will be pilots. The fact is there isn't train drivers many places. That obstacle in ourselves to go on an unmanned flight might disappear with 1 or 2 generations because they're used to going on. The cars might be self-controlled. It is, as I said, it has nothing to do with technology at this stage. It's all about psychology.
Data point here, Nicholas. What about the stresses now on flight crew, particularly from just air traffic management? I come from a city where we now know, because it's been acquired from Freedom of Information, that there have been a lot of Mayday calls from pilots from aircraft landing in London at Heathrow, running short of fuel and having, particularly during bad weather, and a lot of them have called Mayday for an emergency landing, obviously with stacking and everything else. And that's happening in more and more places with the skies getting more crowded, even if they can rely on instruments. What are you seeing in terms of the pressures now on the flight crew?
What I believe is incredibly important here is a recognition within organizations, within airlines, that you cannot have maximum efficiency and flexibility. If you want to give them less fuel and want to keep that tighter, that's fine. But you don't have the flexibility to maybe reroute in these things. I see, and I'm going to take a swipe at some people here since I don't have an MBA. I see too many people are MBA trained who go into organization and optimize, cut. And then they get surprised when it breaks down because there's no flexibility. You cannot have both. And I'd like to relate back to Buzz Aldrin, who spoke this morning. In the 70s, I believe, NASA had the credo, faster, better, cheaper. You know what? You can't get all free. You can get faster and better, but you can't get cheaper. Organizations must stop pretend on this point and start realizing.
And that's putting big stress on the cockpit crew.
At the end of the day, that's stress that's going to be handled by the cockpit crew. But it's organizationally induced. That's where it comes from.
I'm Gustavo Barba from GCAA, Manager Safety Policies and Regulation. And I have a question for Niklas. It's a two-step question. We have been discussing the concept of human behavior. The first part of my question to Niklas is, according to my experience of regulator, human behavior is not a concept that we are addressing in our regulations. We are talking much better about human performance and human attitude. We should focus on that because could be many misconceptions about human behavior. The concept of flexibility, if we are focused on human behavior, we can say this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. This is absolutely unacceptable and will jeopardize safety. Then, do you agree with me that we have to focus more on human performance and human attitude than human behavior?
No, absolutely. Look, call it whatever you call it. I prefer to talk about human behavior because the word performance, again, relates back. We tend to think of the human as a machine. I gotta, say my sorry, but the engineering view of the human being is still a problem in this industry. When you say performance, you think about engine performance, you think about technological specifications. So, but yes, of course I agree we should focus more on that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and the second part, because it's related with that, we are thinking in engineering. Okay, we are not all of us are engineering, but engineering was the first step of this industry. Without engineering, there is no any aircraft on the air. This industry has been very successful by the certification process of aircraft, and we have to depart from this point. Second point is that we are putting humans with the aircraft to work, and this is where the interfaces are happening, and this is where the error, mistake, or the unknown are happening. Focus on these interfaces is how we are moving ahead now, and this is how we can differentiate between the human performance that is very difficult to be measured with the technical performance that can be accurately measured.
Let me just agree with that in the sense that the successes of engineering is that we can fly from here to the US, and so it's been incredibly successful. But just to highlight one point that I'd really like to make, I'd like to relate back to the learning aspect we talked about before. Here is something that's really interesting from recent research. 2 articles, one on aviation and one on process industry. Organizations that have less incidents, recorded incidents, kill more people. So, let me repeat that. Less incidents kill more people. Why is that? Yeah, because if you set an incident target, like any target on human behavior, you get unintended consequences. Organizations who try to set incident targets, what does that lead to? You sit there and you go, ooh, was that an incident? Probably not, because I want to reach the target. People start hiding information. They don't come out. This is probably counterintuitive, but there's a lot of authorities around the world now who's trying to set different targets, which actually risk making us more unsafe.
Right. Can I, Mr. Blooshi and Mr. Zhou, just quickly, that important point, behavior, poor performance, what do you think from your perspectives, both as engineers?
So if I may, yeah. So from my the position, so all the airlines have themselves as a procedure how to deal with that. For my point from CAA's headquarters level, management level, so we concern things like this. So first of all, we need to put them the human factor affairs inside of the certification work. So we concern about the type of designing. So ask them to reduce as more as in that level. And then during the surveys, we asked the airlines report the inside of send a report from our SDR system. Then we account that if this incident happened the second times throughout China's level, maybe in the airlines it's the first time, but in so many airlines in China, we know maybe the second time.
Mr. Blooshi, quickly.
Yeah. We cannot look at the performance in isolation from the behavior. All the system measures the design factors where to avoid consequences of uncontrolled behavior. But then time have shown over and over that there are areas of the behavior that you cannot control and you cannot predict. Even the science cannot predict that. I think there is a lot of work ahead of us to look at this area and shed more light.
So more work to be done, yes. And so we've raised it here. I've got 2 minutes left. Can I just get your point? We may not get it answered, but let me just hear what you want to say.
My name is Shamsu Anjorin from Gowing. I have a question for all panelists. We are requested by our customers to make airplanes that are more efficient, that go faster, that go further. And we do that implementing appropriate technology. And I would like to understand, from your perspective, do you think that we have gone too far in technology, or how far can we go again?
All right.
How further can we go in technology?
Are you going too far on technology? I'm afraid you've only got 30 seconds.
I don't think so. I think technology have contributed a lot to the safety and the performance of aviation, but the challenge is not from the industry side. It is from the other side, from the operation and the user's readiness to fully adopt this technology.
Mr. Zhou.
In China, we always feel industry development too fast. From my point of view, I prefer them slow, a little bit slow.
Nicholas, I'm very struck by what you said earlier and also beforehand. The pilots are not in a position to think anymore. Now, that's a critical question when you hear what Boeing have just asked.
Well, there's great awareness about that, and it's growing. And I said the resilience engineering movement is refocusing back. We've changed our training dramatically. There's initiatives like evidence-based training to make them train what's relevant, not only what's dotted out in the regulation. And we work very close with the regulator to make sure that training is addressing this. So you're absolutely correct to worry, but I'll try to finish up. Don't take the train home. It's going to be a long ride because we are addressing this problem.
You can't get a train back to Dubai yet.
That's correct.
You have to risk driving, the 70 miles in a car, which is probably more dangerous than flying.
Far more dangerous.
Fine. Drive slowly if you're driving back to Dubai. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I hope we've raised a significant issue for you, particularly on behavior, performance, whatever you want to call it, but showing how the frontiers in this area are moving still, even though the instrumentation seems to suggest almost perfection. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.